want to introduce myself, but first I'm going to let my co-host introduce himself, Lee Reiners.
Well, good morning, Jimmy. Thank you, Elizabeth, and good morning to all of you. It is good to be back for the crypto chat series and to be back on campus for another semester. So I know we have a number of Duke students here, and it certainly makes a difference when we have folks physically on campus. The energy is palpable, and I'm feeling refreshed, Jimmy, for another semester. Let me just add too that I'm the only one who appears to take the title seriously, because I actually have my coffee here. I don't know. Oh, okay, there we go.
I have my coffee. Coffee.
Good. But you know, I think we have a lot of repeat viewers, but for those who don't know, obviously here's my bio here. I'm the executive director of the Global Financial Markets Center at Duke Law School. For the past 4 or 5 years, I've taught a FinTech law and policy course. A big chunk of that course has been dedicated to cryptocurrency issues. This fall, I'm actually teaching a pared down version focusing exclusively on crypto. So we might have some of my students from that class that are here. Then I've written extensively about cryptocurrency regulatory issues and quoted in the press quite a bit. And yeah, and I have for those who don't know, I also have a Coursera course that you can take for free. If you're a Duke student, you can take it for free and get the certificate. And if you're not a Duke student, you can still audit the course for free. That's called it's called FinTech Law and Policy. And one of the modules in there is dedicated to cryptocurrency as well. And I know, Jimmy, you have a Coursera course as well. So it's good to see Duke representing on the FinTech front on Coursera. But yeah, very pleased to be here and get started.
Fantastic. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jimmie Lenz. I am the director of 2 of the graduate programs here at the Duke Engineering School, a Master of Engineering in Financial Technology and Master of Engineering in Cybersecurity. I have a little bit of a history in academia, but a much larger history in finance, a couple of decades in the capital market space, starting in a very trading type of role, and then moving into the algorithmic and electronic trading, and then moving into some senior management roles and all kinds of fun stuff along those lines. I was introduced to cryptocurrency and blockchain quite early by this annoying guy. Went to school with one of my daughters back in 2013 probably, and every time I would go to visit her, she would or this guy was always around. It was crazy, and he was always bothering me about this Bitcoin thing, and that was my start in to start investigating kind of the technology and then the cryptocurrencies and everything that came after. Very long story short, that annoying guy ended up marrying my daughter, so now he's my son-in-law. But I do give him credit for introducing me to cryptocurrency and to blockchain. He is also a professor at the University of South Carolina, where he teaches blockchain, and so I always want to thank Reed Timsio for introducing me to the technology. So we're going to kind of dive in. As I mentioned, kind of when we were starting, Lee's been to say the least prolific over the summer, and so I received a couple of questions kind of on the side. I have not shared them with Lee yet, but I think he knows where they're coming from. About some of his writings over the summer and some of the work that he did, but everything I think is the genesis of which is interesting because I'm using the Genesis block behind me here. The genesis of much of Lee's work over the summer came from a Wall Street Journal op-ed. And Lee, if you want to give like a 30-second on the op-ed, and then kind of I'll throw a couple of questions at you.
Sure. Maybe we should put the op-ed in the chat. So after the Colonial Pipeline hack back in May, I'm sure most folks are familiar with that, I was inspired to write an op-ed that connected cryptocurrency to this surge in ransomware that we're still seeing. and argued that, listen, the societal cost associated with these crypto-fueled ransomware attacks exceeds whatever benefits cryptocurrency provides, and therefore policymakers should act aggressively to ban or severely restrict the use of cryptocurrency. So, as you might imagine, it made me a lot of friends in the social media world.
It make a lot of friends. It's actually in the chat now. I popped it in there, but there was a lot of questions around Lee's assertions that because of ransomware we should ban all of cryptocurrency, and so that was the same question I received in about 4 different forms. Do you really want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because of it's not like there wasn't ransomware before cryptocurrency, and if cryptocurrency wasn't around, there would still be some form of ransomware out there. And while it may facilitate it, people who do these kind of things are usually pretty damn creative. And if it wasn't for crypto, there would be another means by which they would do this. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, it is true that ransomware precedes cryptocurrency, but it was very small scale. It did not exist anywhere to the extent that we're seeing it now. And so I think, the data, the numbers prove this out. It's hard to get accurate data on how prevalent ransomware is, because obviously the victims have an incentive in many instances not to report or publicly acknowledge that they've been a victim of ransomware. But the linkage is very clear, and it's obvious when you just look at the fact that every one of these ransomware attackers demands the ransom be paid in cryptocurrency. Okay, no one's asking for prepaid debit cards as it used to be, or something like that. So it is a very strident position, Todd, but I think it's a fair position. So just look at what has happened here in North Carolina. You could not get gasoline for about a week. Shortly after I published my piece, the JBS meatpacking hack occurred, where meat processing essentially shut down in this country, and beef prices spiked. There was a attack at the National Health System of Ireland, where the health system entirely shut down. And one of the things that emerged after my op-ed was that, of course, social media was a cesspool, and folks piled on there. That was to be expected. But I got a lot of emails from folks who were thanking me, and folks that were small business owners who had been impacted by ransomware, and were still kind of digging their way out of this. And they said, thank you for being, kind of our voice. I think folks have sort of been waiting for someone to say what I had said, so they didn't sound like a kook, like it was finally acceptable and polite the company to acknowledge this possibility. So I don't think it's extreme. When you look at the national security implications, we know that, for instance, Russia is using cryptocurrency to bypass U.S. sanctions. So is North Korea. So crypto is not new at this point. Certainly by technology standards, it is not new. You have the Genesis block. That was from 2009. Yeah. Okay, the first iPhone was 2007. So think about how the iPhone has changed the world. Smartphones. We all know this, right? Well, what has crypto done? What's the killer use case? How has it changed average people's lives? And the answer is that it hasn't. Okay, and if it hasn't yet, the chances are that it's probably not going to. So if we look, at a high level and objectively say, okay, what are the costs? Ransomware, national security violations. What are the benefits? Well, the benefits are, obviously a handful of people are able to make a lot of money, speculating this. I think the costs greatly outweigh the benefits, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And I think policymakers should act. But the good news for those of you who disagree with me is that people don't listen to me. So number one, but number two is policymakers really have no idea what to do. They're still wrapping their heads. Certainly in Congress, they're nowhere close to addressing this. The U.S. has a fragmented regulatory system. We have multiple agencies that touch on various aspects of cryptocurrency. They are not in agreement, nor are they working together. And historically, that's what we would expect. So I don't think anything is going to change, nor do I think people are embracing my approach. But who knows? Maybe there'll be another ransomware attack that shuts down a big part of our economy, and folks will finally say, you know what, that Lee Reiners, he might be onto something.
So I think you're and I think you'll admit this. You take a very Western view of this, and while it's true that there is some activity going on in North Korea, it was certainly going on avoiding sanctions using U.S. dollars beforehand. There is certainly activity going on in Russia, but you know where else there's a lot of activity going on in cryptocurrency is in Afghanistan among normal Afghanis, because the Taliban has taken control of cash and the central bank. And guess what? Last year, they didn't even make the list of top 100 countries. In 2021, they were number 20 in use of cryptocurrency. So, that I think that very parochial Western view, and there have been a lot of people in the cryptocurrency space. Probably Vitalik Buterin's been the most prolific about that. And he says it wasn't invented for you. It was invented for all those people that don't have faith in their governments and in their banks and things like that, kind of the other 2/3 of the world. And so I think that, again, it's throwing baby out with the bathwater, because people have been so lax about their their expenditures in the cybersecurity space, because they haven't wanted to invest in that, because they haven't upgraded the systems. We should throw out the way that people are spending money, the way that people are being forced to pay ransom. That's like saying, well, I didn't do anything to protect myself, but those people who held me ransom are the ones that, that the means by which they're doing that should be outlawed. What I think should be outlawed, or I think should happen, is those people should be held accountable. I'm asked all the time, what'll stop? And, the other program I run here is the cybersecurity space. People ask me all the time, well, what can we do to stop all the cybersecurity issues? It's like, how about holding a company or an individual accountable? Has anybody ever been held accountable? I mean, come on. I think that using cryptocurrency is a huge crutch. It's a great excuse, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a huge crutch for why wasn't this investment made over the last 10 years?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, you said that this is a Western view. Well, the one country who has actually implemented my suggestions is China, who's essentially cracked down on all aspects of the crypto market. And I would imagine that they would move on Hong Kong sometime in the near future. So, and that was one of the sort of baseless criticisms of my piece, was that somehow I'm like siding with China with my views, which is absolutely ridiculous. But nonetheless, so it's not a Western view by any means. Two, I agree that companies need to improve their cybersecurity standards and their cyber hygiene, and that they should hire the fantastic graduates from the cybersecurity master's program to help in that regard. But the reality is, and this is a point that I made when I made a CNBC appearance right after my article came out, it is not realistic to expect a community bank in Topeka, Kansas, or a rural healthcare system in North Dakota to defend themselves against sophisticated nation-state organized-backed attackers, whether it be North Korean or Russian. If that is the policy approach that we adopt, then we are condemning our private sector companies to an arms race that they will never, ever win. So I think there needs to be a sort of an all of the above approach, certainly improve cybersecurity standards, certainly greater private-public collaboration when it comes to these security breaches. I think that companies should be required to report to the FBI whenever they're victimized by ransomware. Some have suggested banning the payment of ransomware, of ransom in these attacks. I kind of go back and forth on that. The problem with that is that it's only credible if everyone complies. The moment that you have, one or two firms who are, paying the ransom on the sly, then then the credibility, it's not a credible commitment, right? To borrow from game theory. So let's go after the financial incentive, right? Follow the money. It's the oldest tool in the law enforcement toolkit. It's not easy. No one's pretending that's going to be easy, but I think that ultimately ransomware will impact every country. So I think this needs to be sort of a coordinated global effort. And sort of the analogy I like to make is to CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, and the world community realized that releasing these CFCs was putting a hole in the ozone layer, and they came together to pass the Montreal Protocol and banned it. So it is possible. There is a model out there, but it's just going to take political will and an understanding of this technology, how it works, and what it's sort of doing. But ransomware is not going away, and I think at some point enough companies will sort of finally rise up and say, we can't deal with this anymore. Something needs to change.
I think there are some opportunities in the software space. The community banks and the smaller healthcare systems and things like that. I think there are some great opportunities out there for companies to get into the space and to do more to help upgrade those infrastructures. While I agree, it's probably always going to be a problem, just like robbing banks has always been a problem. Hasn't really stopped. Just the means have changed a little bit. That there are some opportunities there for healthcare systems. I did want to go back. One of the things that you mentioned was China's crackdown, but China's crackdown certainly hasn't been universal, right? Because they're the first country to really roll out a central bank digital currency. And I think it's interesting the central bank digital currency that they've rolled out, because not only did they do it in a pretty big way, 10 cities, but 10 cities, 10 fairly large cities, so pretty populous places, but they've also used it as a means to implement policy changes that are, you and I have talked about it before, that seem to be a really good way to implement policy changes. I think the US is getting behind the curve here. We're seeing more and more electronic payments being done, these central bank digital currencies, things like that. I do worry about that. I worry about things, and it's the next thing I was going to ask you about is the infrastructure bill. Things like that coming out, people making policy decisions that really aren't educated about all the aspects of what they're making decisions on, and driving, what is a burgeoning industry, maybe offshore, maybe not, but I think it certainly has the propensity to do that, because these are virtual currencies. People do like living, here in the US, but, would they mind living in, some island nation or in Spain or, the Mediterranean? Maybe not. I don't know. But what's your thought on that? I am shifting gears here, folks. So yeah, the infrastructure bill was a pretty big deal. This was actually held up for about 3 or 4 days because of a controversy over the inclusion of certain aspects of cryptocurrency in there. And so, Lee, if you want to talk a little bit about kind of what the inclusion of some of the language is in the infrastructure bill, and you're all probably wondering, really, infrastructure bill, cryptocurrency? It's the nature of politics in the U.S. as Lee mentioned before. But if you want to, kind of give a short on, what that means, and then kind of your thoughts around the inclusion.
Yeah. So this was I'll say a manufactured controversy in my opinion. I don't know why I should be surprised anymore for anything crypto related, but even this caught me off guard, and I think it caught a lot of people off guard when it was revealed that there was language in the bipartisan infrastructure bill in the Senate side designed to promote, I'll say, tax compliance. Let's just look at the sort of the ostensible debate here, which is, the government's wondering how they're going to pay for this infrastructure bill. And one of the ways that the Biden administration has promoted paying for it is for tax enforcement, right? And not just for cryptocurrency, but more broadly. And Larry Summers and others have done some work that says, well, if we were to increase the IRS's budget, allow them to hire more audit staff, go after not go after, but audit higher earners, that this would bring in a lot of revenue to the government. And so I don't think anyone, these are taxes that are legally owed, right? So it's just simply enforcing the law. I don't think anyone disagrees, maybe some Republicans. And so cryptocurrency got pulled into this notion. And, listen, we all know that tax compliance is quite minimal in the cryptocurrency space. That can't surprise many of you on this Zoom here. So for those of you who have a Schwab account or an E-Trade account, or just a normal brokerage account, retail brokerage account, you know that at the end of the year, in January, you get sent a 1099 from your broker, and it shows you, these are your profits and losses from the year of trading. And that also gets sent to the IRS. And so when you fill out your tax return, you include that. And it's a great thing, because I actually don't want to have to track on my own all of my trading activity. I like it when Schwab sends me my 1099. It allows it, because they're doing that collection for me. Well, that system does not apply to cryptocurrencies. For those of you who have a Coinbase account or a Gemini or a Kraken account, they're not giving you a 1099. They're not sending any information to the IRS at the end of the year. Reporting is all on you. And you do have to report when you have a legal obligation. The IRS treats cryptocurrency as property. That means you have to pay capital gains on it, short-term or long-term, depending on whether you hold for a year or longer. So the debate in the infrastructure bill was around this notion of who should be considered a broker in the cryptocurrency world for purposes of reporting to the IRS. Okay, that was the debate. And the language started off is quite broad. And the cryptocurrency sector, pushed back, immediately and vigorously and said, well, listen, this could include potential miners. It could include software developers, DeFi platforms. And so they're like, listen, this is not feasible. Now, there's a important point I have to make, is that this was not a new tax. No one was proposing to tax the cryptocurrency in a different way. Okay, this was simply just enforcing the existing tax laws, and it was about who is responsible for reporting to the IRS. So there was a back and forth. It did stall the bill. I was, shocked that one of President Biden's signature agenda items would be stalled because of a cryptocurrency provision. But this is the world we live in, right? This is where there's all these people in this crypto chat. And there was a number of amendments that were introduced. One was by Senator Ron Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon. Who else? Senator Loomis from Wyoming. And there was one other senator, I think I forget, who sponsored an amendment that had explicit carve-outs. It said, this does not cover miners, this does not cover software developers, this does not cover DeFi platforms. And I think the crypto sector was pleased with that amendment and was happy with that language. But ultimately, it was not included in the final bill. The originally broad language was included. And so the crypto sector, I guess, lives to fight another day when the House takes this up. And my understanding is that they are, amassing their forces to descend on Capitol Hill when the House takes this up to hopefully get these carve-outs. So that was really what the debate was about. Now, some of the arguments were completely hyperbolic. I mean, this notion that somehow if you have to comply with existing tax laws, like companies are going to flee overseas, well, in my case, if that's actually true, and I don't think it is, then good, go by, go. If you don't want to comply with law, like everyone else has to comply, then maybe that's not an industry we want in this country, right? So that's my take. But this was obviously a broader argument, right? This was about political power. This is about an industry that wants to have very light touch regulation and enforcement, just like every industry in history has always wanted, right? Just like the fossil fuel sector has wanted, just like any new industry has wanted. And I think it surprised people that they do have political allies. The crypto sector does have political power, and certainly users of crypto are very vocal. And they were called to arms by Jack Dorsey and Gene Simmons from KISS, and they let their voices be heard. So so the crypto sector, it's here to stay when it comes to K Street and lobbying, and we'll see how it pans out here with the House bill. But that's hopefully that gives folks a bit of an overview of where things stand.
Yeah, I think you did. There's somebody in the chat, Rob Mowry, was saying that Coinbase actually is complying and has answered like 500,000 requests from the IRS around identifying individuals and providing a lot of the information. I think the thing that most people are concerned with was miners, validators, people along those lines, and the nature of the technology is different. So, saying that, well, it's just like everything else, it's not like everything else. This is a new technology. We've changed before. We've certainly changed tax law for as different things in the environment change. As here at Duke, we run a couple of blockchains. We're validators on a couple of different blockchains. Or do we want to get into the reporting business? I have a feeling if I tell the people at Duke, hey, we're going to have to start reporting transactions that we validate, they're going to say, Jimmie, you're going to shut those down pretty quick. And is that the point to shut it down? I think the same thing would happen with individuals. They may not move offshore, but you may have a lot less individuals. And as we know, for anybody who is in the space, when you start losing validators on your network, when you start losing members in your network, the value of the network actually drops. The security and things like that drop. So there certainly could be some unintended consequences of this. And I think a lot of it is like a lot of things in the U.S. Obviously, these laws are passed by people who don't really have any idea what they're voting on, and so I think it remains to be seen, how this will actually be implemented. But it could have, I think, some kind of dire effects on the industry. Maybe it doesn't chase them offshore. Maybe it does. I'm not sure, but I think it's certainly in that space. One thing
let me add
sure.
one thing to that, Jimmie, because the way sort of law, especially laws around regulation, work is that what comes out of Congress is very broad, and then it goes to specific agencies, regulatory agencies, to then write the rule that implements Congress's intent. So ultimately, this will fall, no matter what the final language is in the infrastructure bill around crypto tax reporting. It will fall on the IRS to draft the specific rules to implement this. And I think the administration's point and folks at the Treasury Department and the IRS sits within the Treasury Department, their point is like, well, we want Congress to sort of give us as broad authority as possible and not to kind of ham us in when it comes to writing the rule. Kind of let us, we'll get to the right place. There are certainly people in the Treasury Department and the IRS who do know cryptocurrency, who know the technology, know what's feasible. Because one of the arguments from crypto advocate groups was like, listen, there's no way that miners can even comply. They don't know. All they have is the public address, right? I mean, they don't know anybody can, submit this information. And, to borrow a line from Shakespeare, it's almost like, well, the lady doth protest too much, because if this is ultimately unenforceable, why are you so vigorously opposing it? So I think they recognize that Treasury ultimately will be the deciding factor in how this gets implemented. And I think that they should have as broad a mandate as possible, and then use their knowledge and their tools to craft a rule. And I think the crypto sector will also have an opportunity to interact with Treasury when that time comes as well. So they, like everything in crypto, I mean, everything is like apocalyptic to them. It's an existential threat. And complying with laws that everyone else has to comply with is not an existential threat. I'm sorry. And if you think it is, then you're just selling a false bag of goods.
Well, I mean, Lee, you're a lawyer. Do you really want the people that are enforcing the law making the law too? I mean, I don't. I'm not comfortable with that. No oversight whatsoever. Those that are enforcing the law that are making the rules as they go along.
Well, Congress makes the law, and then
I understand, but if they're given broad authority.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing. Like, we have a history here. My background is in financial regulation, right? And it's good that financial regulators have broad authority, because markets change, right? The financial markets are never static. And so they need the ability to be flexible and adjust as circumstances arise. So I don't think it's a big deal, in my opinion, but obviously the crypto sector does. And once again, we're in disagreement. It's shocking.
Shockingly,
yeah.
So you brought up regulators a little bit earlier, and just again, so I did want to kind of touch on that, because certainly over the summer there, just recently over the last few weeks, Chairman Gensler's come out and he's had a couple of different opportunities to basically push his agenda that the SEC should be regulating cryptocurrency. And so I know that you've commented on that, but I wanted to ask, what your thoughts were around the SEC now being the sheriff in being able to regulate cryptocurrencies too. Does that and at the same time, does that translate to all of DeFi?
Well, that's that last part is a very much an open question, and I would say as of now, no, it doesn't translate. So, one, I would take umbrage with your framing, which is like promote his agenda or enforce his agenda. I think what Chair Gensler would say is like, listen, we're just enforcing the law. That's what we were created for. He noted that critics decry this sort of regulation by enforcement. This is one of the terms you hear all the time, is regulation by enforcement, or we need regulatory clarity, okay? Well, the SEC enforces the rules and the laws that are under their remit, right? That's what they do. So that, it's not regulation by enforcement, it's just enforcing the law. And I think in many cases, as Chair Gensler said, that the law is pretty clear when it comes to when cryptocurrencies are considered securities. The Howey test, many people decry it. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's a test from the 1940s, Supreme Court case that dictates when an investment contract exists, and it's a four-pronged test. It's an investment of money in a common enterprise with an expectation of profit, and those profits are derived from the efforts of others. Right, so any type of token offering, you have to ask those four questions, and if all four are met, then it's a security that needs to be registered with the SEC. But Chair Gensler gave a speech a few weeks ago at the Aspen Institute, and this was actually a national security forum, so this should tell you something, that this was he gave a speech at a national security forum. And I would say that he essentially put the entire crypto sector on notice. It was basically like, we're watching you. And he called out, trading platforms for their lack of consumer protection. He called out DeFi for essentially having no regulation and no compliance whatsoever. He called out the risk associated with stablecoins and the fact that many of these stablecoins look like investment funds. And I think most notably, he actually called on Congress, and for the first time, we had a head of a regulatory agency asking Congress to pass new legislation to bring greater consumer protection and regulation around these trading platforms. Because, he had this quote, and he had this line in there where he said, cryptocurrency sits astride or stands astride the existing regulatory framework in the US, right? It does, you guys know this, it doesn't fit neatly into our existing framework. And no one would design, even absent cryptocurrency, no one would design this framework we have from scratch, okay? It's like this sort of Frankenstein that emerged over, decades. And so the Commodity Futures Trading Commission has a role to play in crypto regulation as well. So the US is one of the few countries that has a separate derivatives regulator from securities regulator. Okay, and the CFTC has said that crypto, most coins, so Bitcoin and Ether explicitly, are commodities, okay? And so commodities, spot markets or cash markets, they are not regulated. Only commodity derivatives markets are regulated. Okay, so what does that mean in practice? So platforms like Coinbase, Gemini, Kraken, they are not regulated at the federal level, okay? Because all they're offering for sale on their platforms are select cryptocurrencies, okay? And you saw, for instance, Coinbase, the minute that SEC sued Ripple for conducting an unregistered securities offering around XRP, Coinbase delisted that. Because if they're listing securities on their platforms, then they have to register as a securities exchange with the SEC. Same thing if they're listing crypto derivatives, okay? Then they have to register with the CFTC. But they're unregulated at the federal level. And no one would suggest that it's a good idea for the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange to be unregulated. So why is that a good status quo when it comes to cryptocurrency? So there's this gray area, and he calls that out. So he's limited. The SEC is limited in what they can do. And you've seen some CFTC commissioners actually push back against some of Chair Gensler's remarks and basically say, listen, you're not the only game in town here, just so we're clear. Now, I kind of think that type of those regulatory turf battles never end well. So I'd like to see a little more cooperation. But there's only so much you can do. And the last point I'll end on is DeFi, which is sort of the flavor of the month in crypto. That's a huge problem for regulators, or if you think there needs to be greater oversight and consumer protection in DeFi, because who's the entity that's responsible for compliance? If it's truly decentralized, then it's effectively impossible to enforce any type of regulatory regimes. Now, what Chair Gensler has said in subsequent remarks is that if you peel the curtain back on these DeFi platforms, they're really not as decentralized as they're making you believe, or people want to believe. Okay, that there's generally some type of entity, software developers who are critical to the success and the operations of these platforms. And in those cases, the SEC will take action. But enforcing DeFi, regulation on DeFi platforms, whether it be, they're offering crypto derivatives or lending contracts, it's very much a challenge. And my final point is that regulatory agencies are always under-resourced, okay? Even when it just comes to just their normal day-to-day activities. Now they're having to police these crypto markets, which are just growing rapidly. And it's like whack-a-mole. I mean, the SEC can take down, take an enforcement action against, a couple of platforms. And as Chair Gensler said, they've never lost. So I think that's an important point to make. They've never lost in any of these cases that they brought. But for every one enforcement action, there's 12 new platforms that sprout up overnight, seemingly. So it's a very, very difficult task ahead of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so you and I, again, we differ hugely on this. I think that most of what the regulators are looking at right now, you frame it as consumer protection. I frame it as legacy institution protection. They see, companies see their potential clients leaving in droves. They're certainly not gaining, in particular in the wirehouses. They've been losing customers for years. And they're seeing all of this interest in the decentralized finance, and they're saying, whoa, wait a minute, we want a piece of that. We don't want this to go. So I would assume that probably before the end of the year, we have one of the major banks. I mean, they're already signing on to different types of opportunities and things like that, but I would not be surprised at all before the end of the year if we see one of the major banks all of a sudden become a custodian of these assets to get in on that. So I really don't think that everybody does this voluntarily. How far are you going to protect people from themselves? Well, I mean, it remains to be seen, but I don't think that this is something that your average widows and orphans are getting sucked into, like a lot of other schemes that are perpetrated by licensed brokerage firms. So this is a very, very different. It's more sophisticated. These platforms are not great. I mean, I use them. They're not super easy to use, right? So it has to be something you go in, you learn about, you end up using, especially the DeFi platforms. But I think the interesting thing, and I've been doing a lot of research. One of the things I should mention is here at Duke, and Lee's going to be part of this too. But we will be announcing formally in the next week or two the Digital Asset Research and Engineering Collaborative, which is it will be an open kind of think tank and research platform for digital assets. But one of the things that I have noticed in starting to do some research in this area is the vast majority of decentralized finance participants are actually doing what's called yield farming. They're buying yield earning assets. Remember when we used to do that? They were called bonds back when the U.S. government let bonds float and they weren't subsidizing every debt floater, well, at least corporate debt floater out there. I guess to some extent they're doing it to individuals too, by keeping interest rates artificially low. But it's interesting that the most prolific thing by far is yield farming, just simple people depositing money and looking for a return on their assets. It's not anything super sophisticated. It's not some sort of high-powered derivative. Nobody's using Gaussian cupola or anything like that. These are pretty straightforward type products that people are using that are simply yield earning. Do they need to be protected from themselves? I would say no. I think the SEC is taking a very different look, but I think they're doing it at the behest of a lot of the traditional, the legacy financial services firms. Over the past few years, we've seen the number of assets unique assets that individuals can invest in, and you and I have talked about this before, decrease substantially, in particular in the equities markets, right? The number of equities listed on the New York Stock Exchange has dropped by over half in the last 7 years. Have they disappeared? Is there any less financing? No, it's all being done, privately in private equity. Is there any regulation around that? Not really. But us as retail investors can't get involved. So, us being, as a retail investor, buying into the next Apple computer, buying into the next Google, that's becoming, less and less and less opportunity there. So, the fact that there may be an opportunity in the decentralized finance space, if you do your homework, if you learn how to use it, if you learn how to go out there and do it, and you aggressively actually seek to do it, not somebody calling you on the phone from some call center someplace, but you seek to learn about it and to invest in it. Is there something wrong? Should that really be regulated?
Yes.
I'm passionate about this, Lee.
No, so listen, I agree with pretty much everything you said there, Jimmy. And I think one of the things that frustrates me is that when people hear me speak critically of crypto, they default to, well, he just is a stooge for like the banks or something like that. And it's like, okay, listen, I was a bank regulator. Okay, I worked for the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. Trust me, that was no friend of the banks, nor am I still. And you can look at some of my writings and scholarship there. So that is certainly not the case. I think, one of the points that Chair Gensler made again in the speech, and I encourage people to read the speech, even if you disagree with a lot of it, I just thought it framed the issues so well, is he said, look, the entire securities regulatory apparatus that we have emerged in the aftermath of the Great Depression, okay? And, the Great Depression and the bubble that fueled that was all in, what we would consider now like traditional TradeFi, traditional assets, right? Stocks, bonds, and whatnot. And so, incomes FDR and the Securities Act is passed, and the Investment Company Act is passed. And that actually benefited the US economy tremendously, because now investors had a degree of assurance that this was a regulated market, that they weren't going to get taken to the cleaners. And it allowed our capital markets to grow. It allowed our companies to access funds. And it was a tremendous competitive advantage to the US. And to this day, the US has the deepest, most liquid capital markets in the world. And that benefits all of us, and it benefits our economy. So his point. I just went on, someone put me on mute there. So for those who say, crypto should be unregulated, DeFi should be unregulated, then the market is never going to grow, or is never going to make enough people comfortable to interact. Yes, people should always do their research, no matter what it is. I totally agree with that. Always do your own research when it comes to investing. But if this is something that folks want to see grow and have people feel comfortable interacting with, then there's going to need to be a degree of regulation. And I think some people in the crypto market get this, whether or not they're willing to publicly say it or not. So I would point to the Winklevoss twins who run Gemini. Okay, if you've been in New York or DC the past couple of years, you might see like buses or subway signs with, it's like Gemini, the first regulated cryptocurrency exchange, right? Really leaning into this message of, well, we're regulated, because they recognize that for the average person to want to get into this, they're going to need some degree of assurance. And that's historically the role that the SEC and regulators have played. So, so I kind of reject this caveat emptor, buyer beware mentality. And when you have incidences like Polynet, for instance, right, where 600 million in back rates, and then somehow through, I don't know, just goodwill, it comes back, that does not lend credibility to this, okay? That is going to keep a lot of people on the sidelines. So I think if you actually want to see the crypto sector grow, DeFi grow, you should be embracing smart regulation, right? I don't think the appropriate stance is, no, don't touch this at all. We don't want any regulation, okay? Because that's just not realistic, nor is it going to attract users, okay?
Yeah, no, I am going to go on the record here and say I do agree with you in a sense there. The one thing that I don't want to see are retail bucket shops like you have in in equities in particular, fixed income too. These retail focused just bucket shops that are out there. The FINRA and the SEC have been loath to close them down. They just passed a law that they have to post larger deposits. Doesn't really help anybody because they still proliferate, and there are a lot of those people that are licensed out there that are just serial perpetrators of these kinds of things. And so to that extent, I don't want to see crypto go down that road. I don't want to see decentralized finance go down that road. So in some sense, I think there is a need. I already hear the language. There are certain things that I hear that bother me in the crypto space, people talking about crypto whales and things like that. Whenever I hear language like that, that came from a bad 80s movie about a bucket shop. And so people in I think the institutional side of things needs to buck up a little bit. I came from that space, probably, I would say 80% of my career was spent squarely in the institutional space. I think there is certainly room for those kinds of players to come in and, be regulated more like institutions, which is very, very different than the retail sector. But I think there is some room for that. So I will grant you that there is a little bit of room, but that's where I want to see it. I don't want to see this go down the road of those kinds of things, those bucket shops that have proliferated on Wall Street for such a long time that are only there to take advantage of people, absolutely nothing else. I don't think the decentralized finance space is there, but I could see it going there just by some of the language that I hear, mainly on roadsides and things like that. Learn how to trade crypto, and these pop-up ads that you see. That has bucket shop written all over it in my mind. So in some sense, I do agree with you that there is some need for guardrails to be put up.
Yep, a point of agreement. Driving around Durham, I don't know if you see these signs, Jimmie. There's like yard signs. It's like learn to trade crypto, and then there's the number. And I'm so tempted to call the number.
I think we should.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, we should.
Find out who's on the other end of that phone.
But I think it's easy to say, listen, the nature of crypto is, do your own research. There's no intermediaries. It's unregulated. Laws, code, this and that. And that's fine and dandy. But once, quote unquote, real Americans are starting to get taken advantage of and lose money, they're going to want recourse, just like they always have, right? They're going to go to their representative, to their senator, and they're going to say, I got fleeced. You need to do something about it. And it's just a matter of, how long we wait until we do.
I think we have had several people in the chat. We should do that on our next call, on the next Coffee and Crypto. We should call one of these 1-800 learn to trade crypto things and listen, let everybody listen in on it. Maybe we should, or at least record one and tell everybody what happened. Lee, I know our time is about up here. I want to thank you again. It's always fun. Great comments in the chat. I think it's great to see a lot of people thinking about this. I do want to kind of end with a couple of things here, and then I'll give you a couple of minutes. I think there are some guardrails around this. DeFi in particular are probably appropriate. Cryptocurrency is it's a new kind of technology. I think forcing it into an old framework of regulation is incorrect. I don't think that's appropriate at all. I don't think that saying, well, it needs to fit into this old legacy environment is appropriate. This is a very, very new technology, has a very new approach. And so I think that we need to be very thoughtful about what we do. I also think we need to look at and see, what's going on in the world. This is a global phenomena. It's not, this is not US centric. We're seeing things going on in Asia and South America and Europe. Africa. This is a really, really big deal. And lastly, you know, when we think about crypto, I mean, I see people here from around the world, and I know some of the people on here literally from around the world. I think we do need to take a global look at it, a global view. As I said, you know, there are places that have had all kinds of political turmoil and things like that, where cryptocurrency was literally one of the few avenues they had to secure their wealth, and to do it very, very quickly. And to do it outside of the government purview for reasons of personal safety and things like that. So I think it definitely has a place in this world. This is an asset that is not going away. And I want to thank you all for being here. We will be posting this, but I want to thank you all for being here. But I don't want to be the last word. I'm going to leave that to Lee.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. I agree with a lot of what you said. Obviously, you know, the nature of crypto is that it's borderless, and it is a worldwide asset. And I'm going to put it again in the chat, because I put it in earlier. I think this article from today's Wall Street Journal actually summarizes nicely what's going on in terms of crypto regulation in the US, in Europe, in Asia. And the takeaway is that we're very different, right? So I think, you know, when we again look at the traditional bank regulatory space, you know, there's been a mechanism in place since the late 70s designed to bring jurisdictions together to harmonize international standards, so we don't have a race to the bottom, right? Because, you know, banks are also large banks are global institutions as well, and so if you have, you know, one jurisdiction with lax rules, then guess what? Banks are going to set up shop there, and we're all going to pay the price. And we saw that in 2008. So. I think there needs to be a parallel effort at the international level, and hopefully soon you'll start to see, you know, President Biden or prime ministers actually raise this at G7 and G20 meetings, because no matter where you sit on the spectrum in terms of, you know, crypto is great or crypto is awful. I don't think this current system we have, where every jurisdiction is doing their own thing, is serving anyone particularly well. And even in the US, we have fragmented a structure. And then, by the way, we have 50 different states. We have federalism here as well. So, you know, Wyoming is doing something completely different than what New York is doing as well. And I think there are real dangers in that. So, but again, thanks everyone for coming, and great question. Great questions, and you know, looking forward to doing this, because I'm sure in a week something crazy will happen in crypto.
We will definitely be scheduling another chat very soon, because absolutely no doubt a week will not go by without something crazy happening.
Absolutely.
All right, great seeing everybody, and we will be posting this in the YouTube channel a little bit later on. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care, everyone.